Hi everyone, Nadine Wellwood, and with me today I have Bryce Talsma. Want to talk a little bit in light of it being Remembrance Day coming up. A little story and introduction as to how Bryce and I met and how he's been a big part of my campaign when I was with the People's Party of Canada. And also want to do a little bit of an interesting note from a veteran's perspective. And Bryce has got some interesting stories to share, and I thought that he was the perfect person to talk a little bit about some modern day warfare and what that means to our freedoms.
Sure.
Okay. So Bryce, I want to talk first off about how we met.
Okay.
Because you kind of called me up.
Well, actually, it was one of our shared associates. Ron actually got a hold of me, and he said, Bryce, I'm calling in a favor. I want you to meet someone. This girl's really impressive. And I said, okay, well, I said, Ron, I respect you, and I'm always have an open mind. I promised myself, no matter what, I would keep an open mind about everything, especially when it comes to matters of politics. That's the whole nature of it. I'm a big believer in democracy and making sure that I knew everything I could know about the vote coming up. So I said, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Well, to be honest, I mean,
any regrets on having done it?
Well, before we get to that part, no. But honestly, when I actually said yes, I was on the board for the Conservative Party. I was a big supporter of Blake. I have a lot of respect for him as a person, and I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And then I sat down, met you at the coffee shop, and this ball of energy comes leaping out of your seat and gives me a big hug. I was like, okay, we have a hugger. So, from there, we sat down and you plowed right into it. No holds barred. Probably the most authentic 5 to 10 minutes I've ever had with a politician aspiring or actually in government. It was a very authentic conversation right away. And that was really... I was taken quite aback by that. Just on that first impression, I said, okay, this girl's serious. So yeah, that was my first impression.
Yeah. And so when we did meet, you
Yeah.
were working for the Conservative Party.
Yes,
here locally at the
Yeah.
EDA.
Yeah.
And so what won you over?
Well, so a couple things, and I was wrestling over this for a couple months. Well, maybe even longer. As the spring and summer have been going on, there was a lot of movement within the Conservative Party as they're trying to figure out how they're going to make a campaign against the Liberals. And I was very dissatisfied with all their answers because it felt like they were being disingenuous with what they were even believing. And anytime you're not true to yourself or to your convictions, you don't come off well. And I think they were trying to pretend something that they were not. So I was already kind of unhappy, but I was going to just hold my nose and do the right thing because that was where my political convictions were lying. And yeah, you don't let people just skate by. And I have to applaud you on that. You were actually going on about how all the different policies and each one of them, especially when you hit on, individual freedom. That's a cause really close to my heart. As a veteran of the Canadian Forces, someone who's fought for this country and for the right to be as free as you can be. And you were talking about the individual freedom and responsibility. And I hadn't heard that spoken in Canadian politics in my adult life. So I was like, okay. But I still was hedging bets. Like, well, that's all great. You have a great policy, and you seem like you're, going to be carrying the champion of freedom. But, I was still not. Well, I was committed to being part of the big blue machine. And then you said, wouldn't it be nice if you could actually just vote the way for your convictions of the government you wanted, rather than voting out of fear? And that was the line that got me. Is because I realized I was voting out of fear. I was voting out of what I didn't want, not what I wanted. And that was just a light bulb moment. And I realized, well, it doesn't matter what's popular, what's not popular, whether there's an established thing or whether, the government of the day that was, the Trudeau's Liberals in power, which I have a my own issues with.
You and the rest of Alberta.
Yeah.
But
So
that's okay.
well, that's and that's okay, But being honest and forthright and saying it's not about that. It's what do I want from my country, and to live in a country where I can be proud of, where everyone can be proud to be an individual. It doesn't matter what stripe you are, what color you are, what your beliefs are. It's that you have dignity as an individual to be free to choose your destiny, and to do anything else was going to be against my own values. And you didn't let me get away with just closing my eyes and sleepwalking through. Caused some serious disruption to the Conservative board that I was on when I resigned. Sorry about that. Not really, but sorry, it was awkward. It caused a little bit of grief in the house. My wife's quite active too, and she couldn't quite wrap her head around for a couple of weeks of why I had just all of a sudden, in her mind, just randomly, just snap of a fingers, had put all my weight behind this new party, this new movement. But it wasn't. I was just being honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you were a member of the Canadian Forces.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit quickly about your background?
Sure.
And then maybe share a little bit about what inspired you to join.
Sure.
The Canadian Forces.
Okay. So I joined in 2006. I'd already had my university degree, and I was a direct entry officer. So I had signed up as an infantry officer of the Canadian Forces. So after 2 years, I was stationed with the 1st Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry in Edmonton. And from there, I was assigned as 1st Platoon Commander, Alpha Company. And I was part of Task Force 309, deploying to Afghanistan from September of 2010, returning in late April of 2010. Yeah, 9 to 10, yeah. So it was just over 7 months of combat. I led 40 men into combat. We had a lot of, 160 plus IEDs. We were the.
What's an IED?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I'm having a little bit of a military background. I get all the acronyms.
You bet.
But
Anytime I do an acronym, you stop me because it's a word whisker I have. So
the military is the only profession I know where you can have an entire conversation in acronyms.
Yes, it's awesome, but not always best for speaking outside of your tribe. So an improvised explosive device. They're extremely deadly. So with the Taliban, which was the head insurgent group in southern Afghanistan, they would take various explosives or make them themselves out of styrofoam, diesel fuel, and put them into jugs, use whatever they could get, and plant them all over in an attempt to disrupt and kill coalition forces, and as a way to get rid of the coalition forces, topple the government, and resume control, and make it a safe state for militant jihadists to train for and fight against Western interests around the world. So that was so there's a lot of IEDs that we were going up against. I was forward deployed in a platoon house, which was in the heart of the darkness. Actually, where I was in southern Afghanistan, Bazari Panjwai district was one of the intellectual hearts of the Taliban movement. There's even where I fought British Imperial forces that fought back in the 1890s. We actually found some artifacts when we were digging in one day into a hard position. We found a British belt buckle from 1890. That was terrifying, depressing as all sin. Oh man, we're still here. 110 years, we still haven't won.
It's going to be a while longer.
Well, and really, we need to define what winning is. The Russians had fought there, and there we were. Extraordinarily dangerous. Lost some good friends in the process. Had some extremely close calls myself. I thankfully brought all my troops home. However, even since of my return, a lot of troops, including my best friend, have succumbed to the experiences that they had, where they have been able to overcome them. So they've subsequently self-destructing and committing suicide. So I'm conflicted about it. I'm very, very proud of the service I gave. My calculations, I'm approximately one of 114 men who has commanded troops in combat for Canada. So out of 34 million Canadians and change, I'm one of 114. That's a very rare company. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that we did things that even the Americans said was impossible. We did direct mentorship with the Afghan National Army. That was really a real feather in my cap. Very proud of that. And just that we did everything we were ever asked to do.
So when you signed up, though, for the military, is that what you signed up for? Is that what you expected to be doing?
Yes, I signed up to fight. I signed up it actually took me a really long time to get in. So after 9/11, the towers dropped. I was just halfway through my university studies. I said, okay, as soon as I get my degree, I'm going to sign up. Signed up and submitted my application in 2004. However, because I had done a stint as a non-denominational Christian missionary, I was deemed a security risk by the Army. So they had to do an extended background check for not just 5 years or 10 years, but actually the full extent of my life, because they were assured. It was quite hilarious because I thought
you were going to leave or something.
Well, because I was a missionary in Poland, and I was a former Warsaw country.
Yeah.
The ironic thing is I was there when it was already applying for membership into NATO. So, and the most hilarious part is I was told this by a ethnic Russian who was in Canadian uniform, in a very thick Russian accent. Mr. Talsma, we are seeing you as a very much a security risk. You can't make this up. I was like, really? Born in Alberta, I'm third generation. Like, one of the reasons I signed up was because my paternal grandfather was interned by Nazis, and after the war fled Europe for freedom. I mean, and he was rescued by Canadian soldiers. He's like, I'm going to Canada. Like, we're trying to return the debt to this nation for everything it's given my family, and I'm told by this Russian that I'm a security risk. Yeah. So
did 9/11 impact your?
Oh, massive. No, that was a shot across the bow. When you have those moments, and for those kids, there's generations who don't even remember that. I mean, that's not. Oh my goodness, we're coming up on like high school students who have grown up never seen that. I mean, I seen the towers drop, and I can relate very much to the Americans in Pearl Harbor.
I was in a room that day.
Yeah.
We were doing a modeling and simulation course.
Yeah.
Human factors engineering modeling simulation, but a modeling simulation course. And we had majors, captains, colonels all in the room when they wheeled in the TV.
Yeah.
And we watched it. And the room was just deathly silent. It was on our soil, so close to home.
And something that should never have been possible.
Yeah.
The first one went in, and because we were watching TV right away, pretty much after the first one here. We're like, well, what's going on here? And I was watching live when the second plane went in, because we're like, well, that must be an accident. Like, what happened? Like, you're trying to did the pilot have a stroke? I mean, what? I mean, the computer failure, engine. Like, how did this happen? And then when that second one in, just the world
changed.
It just collapsed. I mean, your worldview, how you thought it was. I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean, I was there when I was really young. The Cold War was on, and the Cold War stopped. So my formative years in the 90s were when the supremacy of America. I mean, that you couldn't compete. Like, there was nothing that ever stopped the superpower of America. And then when that happened, you're going, we're back at war. There are opponents to our way of life. And whether you want it or not, they don't like what we stand for.
Elaborate on that.
Well,
what do we stand for? Because that's the question mark a little bit today.
Well,
because we have so many attacks on our liberties and our freedoms.
I think, to be perfectly honest, I think what's happened is because we went through such a period of such dominance where we've gotten lazy.
There's no Cold War anymore. We don't know the enemy.
There is no opposition philosophy, or hasn't been, or recognized as an opposition philosophy to our way of life. So our ability to articulate and defend what we are and what we stand for, those core principles has, I would say, significantly atrophied. However, I think for me, what we are is a country of individual freedom. We are one of the inheritor states uh, of the champion of the individual, and that I mean, to borrow from, I mean, the Americans are always much better at this than the Canadians. Canadians are just kind of on the coattails of Americans' rhetoric and ability to, their articulate. Between America and Britain, we've always had these two champions of the English language being able to better articulate what we are. But Canada's, I think, the best experiment out of all of them. Where we take the best of individual liberty and freedom, but making an opportunity for us to find a person's best destiny. Equality of opportunity. That's really what we are. But we aren't just a collection of random individuals. We also have this really strong built-in philosophy of a community. That it takes a community to live in the North. You want to live up here? It's hard. And yeah, you can do it as an individual, but when you get hurt, when you get sick, when something goes wrong, you're going to die. That's built into our DNA. So that's why we have these strong community values. So individual, exceptionalism of choice and freedom, but together as a society, which gives you the strength and the courage to be adventurous. That was always the secret sauce to Canada. And now I think we don't understand that. We don't even understand our own historic legacy because we've never articulated it correctly and never understood it in its context. So for me, when the towers went down, that was a theocracy. That was a major philosophy of militant jihadism, which is bent on world domination. And if you don't believe that, you haven't looked at what they were preaching and are preaching. I mean, we haven't stamped out that philosophy. It still exists and is still. I mean, that was the underlying philosophy of ISIS and all those adherents. And that attracted. I think Calgary was the largest contingent of Canadians went to go support ISIS because that was the philosophy, was worldwide caliphate and to put the world under Sharia law because they believe that's the best way to for a human to live. Mm-hmm. I vehemently disagree with that. I think going under a theocracy is abhorrent and evil, and I will not live under that. And it's worth my life, or at least the risk of my life, to fight against that. So I was very familiar with militant jihadism very early and realized that it was a threat. I wouldn't say it was an existential threat that they were going to create an actual threat to overthrowing Canada, but they could do a lot of harm to our society and our country in the meantime if we weren't willing to engage them on their own playing field. Mm-hmm. If we didn't meet them on their playing field, they meet us on ours. That's one of the stories, I tried to relate. When I was in Afghanistan in 2009, both Iraq and Afghanistan were all of the fighters, all the jihadist fighters, because they had a hard time getting into Canada and North America because we clamped down on our travel. It was hard to get into Europe. And they would flock to these regions. I was fighting Chechens. It's the weirdest thing. Because Chechens are, they look very Caucasian. They would have the same kind of equipment that we would have. So they would, a battle vest. They looked like regular soldiers. And yeah, there they are. They came from all walks of life trying to come and fight us. And I said, perfect, keep coming. If you want to fight a Westerner, fight the soldiers. You can leave the civilians in my country to, live their quiet, peaceful lives. That's what we were designed to do. So, yeah.
So what does it mean then to be a soldier?
Well, that's a very complicated answer, actually. To be a soldier, it is you're accepting unlimited liability. You're accepting that the state you're surrendering to the state the rights that you're fighting to defend. So it's a weird thing. So I'm fighting to defend freedom and liberty and democracy, and I'm now in exchange for me to do that, I give up all of those rights. I don't even have the right to life. Our military is the one organization where they can lawfully order myself to be killed. Like, for example, if we're pinned down by a sniper or by a machine gun and I can't find it, I have the legal authority to order one of my troops to stand up and get shot so I can find out where he is and then plan a counterattack.
Wow. How do you deal with that?
Well, you have to recognize the gravity of that position. You have power over life and death, over your troops, over yourself, and over your enemy. And that's if you're not afraid of that power, you shouldn't have that. If you're not in awe of the fact that you're able to lawfully take life, and in some ways give it, and I don't mean in the sense of like you're providing life, but you can spare life. You should show mercy. I remember this was late in our tour. We had heard an explosion off in the distance, and to be honest, you hear explosions all the time over there. I mean, it's a combat, it's a war zone. Flash of smoke. We go on the radio.
Was that you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly right. Hey, do we have any call signs out there? Hey, and no. Random ID went off. Okay, well, back to work. Do. Carrying out their day. And then up come these two individuals. One's cradling his arm. Okay, comes up. And so my A&A counterpart and I, we came out.
A&A?
Afghan National Army, thank you. Captain Ramatullah, he was Baluch. He fought the Russians as Mujahideen. I mean, this guy's been fighting a long time. Love the guy.
He was 34.
No. But a real warrior. And I mean, there's a lot of things I admire about the Afghanis. They've been treated very poorly by history and by those around them. A lot of the fighters we found were actually from Pakistan. And a lot of the funding was coming from Pakistan.
That was the new fighters, right?
Yeah.
The old ones, I mean, they've been fighting for so long.
Yeah, but they were being bolstered by the Pakistanis. And anyways, that's a whole different thing. Anyways, so in come these two local nationals, Afghanis, the villagers. And one is very catastrophically injured. You can tell that he's got his arm is really injured. We walked up and did a search. Okay, yeah. And they're telling us the story. Wow, he was just a very simple farmer, and he bent over a stack of sticks, and an explosion happened and blew off his arm. Now we take a look. Yeah, you bet that arm is completely gone. That is an amputation by a blast. You bet. So we immediately take him in. We provide him medical relief, and we call in an evac chopper, and he's going to get taken back to CAF, and he's going to live. So I sit and I have a talk with my counterpart, and he goes, Captain Bryce, what did you think about this man? I said, I think he's a Taliban bomb maker. He goes, really? What makes you say that? I said, well, it's very obvious to me, the blast mechanics being what they are. If you're over some branches and you're reaching down, the blast, you're going to catch it with your body cavity, and you're going to basically do a lot of damage. You're probably not going to survive that, actually. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a bomb maker and you're emplacing it, you're going to have one arm out, and when it goes off, you're going to have a nice clean severing. He goes, exactly all right, bomb maker. I'm like, perfect. But what strikes me about that story, and how I know that we are always on the right side, there's no written rule about this, but if there was any Canadian soldier, because this is in the time when they were starting to wrap det cord around army captives and pop off our heads like dandelions, or behead us with rusty knives and stuff. So we had a standing rule that if we were going to get captured, you just put a grenade, put in your frag vest, and blow yourself up, because I'm not being captured. I'm not going out that way to go on a propaganda video. And basically, to a man, that was our standard rule. But the Taliban don't have the same fear of us. When they hurt themselves, they went to the NATO bases because they knew they were going to get help. That's how you know you're on the side of right, because I still treat my enemy better than he would ever treat me. Because that's the Canadian way. You want to fight? We'll fight. And I'll wipe the floor with you. You're done fighting? I'll take care of you. And I was always very proud of that. And I'm very proud of my country. I'm very proud of my countrymen for being like that. Yeah.
Welcome back. So we kind of ended on you were proud to be a Canadian, because we always knew you were on the right side.
Yes.
Do you still have that same sense of pride today?
Oh, that's a hard one to actually answer. I mean, I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of our history. I'm proud of where we've been, and all the things that has come before. Am I proud of where we are today? No. I am actually quite fearful for where we are. I think we're. How do I say this? I'm
not very politically correct. let me just assure you of that.
Well,
for sure, there will be lots of negative comments about.
Well, no. You know what it is? It's this descent into tribalism. We're losing what brings us together, and we're focusing on what drives us apart. And that's coming from everywhere. This is not just a phenomenon of one man, one drama teacher pretending to be a prime minister. This is an endemic. It doesn't matter. We're trying to micro-identify ourselves into whatever tribe we want to belong to, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that as an Albertan.
Now,
go ahead.
Let me stop you on that, because
Yeah.
you just identified yourself as an Albertan.
Exactly. I never did. I never did before. Especially when I was in the forces, I was a federal citizen. I wasn't even a citizen of a province. I was always known as a cowboy. Well, yeah, sure, because I had belt buckles. That was more of a style thing. I have a Western Canadian mentality of because we each have these flavors.
So what's a Western Canadian mentality? Because right now we have very much this division between East and West.
East and West.
So is it the cowboy?
Well, you know what? How to best encapsulate what is a Western Canadian? I think there's this can-do attitude. No matter how big the problem, we'll figure it out. Make the hard calls, make the hard decision, but move. We're not the most deliberate of all the different Canadians. We're probably the most impulsive, but also makes us the fastest moving, and makes us hard. People have a hard time keeping up with us because we move. We speak the fastest. We move the fastest.
I don't know, Newfoundlanders.
Newfoundland. Okay, you're right. I should never take Newfoundland for granted. Best fighters, though. Well, them and Cape Bretoners. I love fighting with those guys.
That's because they're stubborn.
Oh, man, and they're just built for battle. I love those guys. Anyways, but yeah, no, but it was just this pan-Canadian. I never identified as that. But now I do. Now, how sad is that? How sad is that?
So what changed?
Well, I think, so after I got out of the forces, I joined, I was in the oil and gas sector. And all of my family, I put down roots. I left the forces and started working. Raising a family. And I think what I realize is because that a lot of my values of individual responsibility, of individual freedom, of trying to make the most opportunities as possible economically, were not shared by the governments. And I think this has been artificially imposed upon all of us. These seeds of division. I think they're on purpose.
So if you make a good point, seeds of division,
yeah.
And they've been imposed. So where are they being imposed from? I mean, is it one institution? Is it multiple institutions?
I think if I had to encapsulate it, I would say it's the militant left. It's this neo-Marxist.
That's a big group.
It is, but it's a group that we thought we had stamped out a long time ago. I mean,
and now with the muscle of freedom atrophying, and with
because we can't say what we believe. It's like say, well, what's a Canadian? Well, we're not American. That's not enough. It's not enough to be an anti-something. So, even in the later days of the Cold War, what are we? We're not communist. Oh, yay for us. It's not enough. So what ended up happening is I believe happening in our schools. This philosophy started to gain traction and gain root. So you had the neo-Marxists, and then you had this cult of victimhood, and everyone gets to be a victim at any point in their own history. Like you go back far enough, if you know history, you can go back far enough. Everyone's a victim. So I'm of ethnic Dutch descent. That matters to me. But if you go back far enough, the Dutch were conquered and run by the Spaniards, which is why when you watch the World Cup, the Dutch still really go after the Spaniards. Like you want to talk about, they never forgive. But the thing is, if you go back far enough, everyone's a victim. And if you want to be a victim, you just keep going over it over and over again.
If you ever go to Holland, by the way, make sure you wear a Canadian flag because you will never buy a drink.
Roger that.
Yeah. No, they still love us today. Yeah. I remember going in and oh, you're Canadian, and that changed the whole tune of everything in Holland.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we should be doing more to foster that elsewhere in the world. By being something. So I think when this philosophy has taken root, and I think it gets pandered to by the political class for their own means, and by political class, I do mean those left of center. I think it's quite funny. Before the shared ideals, if you're right or left, there was that individual freedom was pretty well championed by both liberals and by conservatives. I'm a big L liberal, big C conservative. Now it seems the last bastion of individual freedom and liberty and rights seems to be the right of center. And maybe in some ways I got to move away from thinking right and left. It's not about right and left to me anymore. It's about the individual versus is the
state.
Is the individual the answer, or is the state the answer?
Yeah, is it groupthink or is it the individual?
Yeah, and by
for the greater good.
For the greater good. So all of these things, it's this multifaceted blob of things that are just dividing all of us, and it's making us incapable of solving the big problems that we have.
So what are some of the big problems that you see that we have?
Well, the country's being ripped apart. So as we've seen in the last election, we have a balkanized country. We're no longer interested in what we can do together as Canada. We have no big vision of what we want. So now we have one vision being pitted against another. So on the altar of environmentalist eco-activism, so that way we can be pious at the altar of Greta Thunberg.
Don't get me started on that. I've already taken my bruises.
Yeah. But offering that up for a pittance, we're willing to demonize an entire region rather than trying to work together to find positive solutions. I find that deeply distressing. I think it shows a really casual disregard for what can go on in the world, and really being naive to the fact that Canada, although is a very unique and special place, we're still populated with what I would refer to as the Mark I human. The Mark I human is an amazing creature, can do amazing things, can take amazing punishment, and capable of amazing acts of charity and kindness and solidarity. But it can also be capable of group insanity, viciousness, lying, despicability, all those things.
Mob behavior.
Mob behavior. The human heart's cleaved in two. One side's right, one side's wrong. Good, evil. However you want to conceptualize that. And because of the Mark I human, because we don't understand that. You take a look, because I look at the international world, and not a lot of people, not everyone does. Chile's in riots, Lebanon's in riots, Hong Kong's in riots, Africa's up in arms, Middle East is at a tinderbox ready to rock and roll between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the Turks.
Oh, there's some interesting economics and geopolitical movements that are happening.
You bet.
And especially with the U.S. pulling back to more of an imperialistic style of governance.
Yes.
Because they really were the enabler, I think, for more peace through trade.
Yep.
Historically, not way back, but in our more recent history, and they're pulling back from that. So I think we're seeing a lot of unrest. Geopolitical movements going on, and then combine that with some demographic shifts that we have happening, and that's a whole other video, so we'll have to come back to that. Staying a little bit more on focus around and freedoms, and some of the struggles we have today. The People's Party of Canada in particular ran on a very different platform, and we saw where that ended.
Yes.
It became very obvious that is it because that it was too extreme for people, or do you think it was just from a pure place of fear? I mean, one of the things I challenged you on the day that we met is you put your life on the line to defend the freedoms, the values, the things that you believed in most. I was just simply asking you to open your eyes and take a leap of faith
Right.
I wasn't asking you to run in front of a gunfire, and you kind of laughed at me and you're like, oh, damn you.
Yeah.
But that was it.
Yeah.
I think, and that was part of it too, was, how difficult is it to cast a ballot for what you want?
If we had a crystal ball of why, this is what everyone's asking the $1 million question. Why was the PPC? Why did the vote evaporate from the PPC from even its lowest imaginings? It was polling much higher in a lot of different places.
Yeah. I've had people say, well, if Max had even stayed at the debates, we would have polled higher.
I've heard that too. There's a couple things. The Canadian sense of democracy is not as entrenched as the American one is, and our expression of our democracy is also different than the British.
Is it American democracy or Canadian democracy, or is it identity? Because when you ask an American, they identify as, I am an American.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of pride that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, we have this multiculturalism where we don't identify necessarily, and you did that. You said, I'm an Albertan.
Well, yeah. Well, which is speaking to how we're breaking down even more than what we were as a country even 20 years ago. Whether that's an expression of multiculturalism, I think we're just democratically lazy now. I think, and the reason I say that is we have a view of the way politics were done in the past, and we just think that's the way it's going to go in the future. One of the things where I'm a bit of a I think quite heavily about these things. The politics of the 90s is over. The politics of the early 2000s is over. We no longer live in an era of American hegemony over the entire world where we have global peace imposed upon by the American Navy. And anyone who thinks that, I don't want this to happen, but when America does withdraw, all those people say, well, America can't be a police of the world.
But they have been.
They have been. And what happens?
A long time
and
now.
What happens when they don't? And all of a sudden,
since World War II,
when shipping routes are now open for piracy, when there's friction points between two different states that they don't get told to just be quiet, it's going to be really bad. And I think we need, and my view on that, is we need to have a Canada that is strong and united and has sane, rational policies that puts Canadians first. I'm not a Korean. I'm not someone who lives in China. I don't live in Vietnam. I don't live in Africa. I live in Canada. And I think we should have the strongest possible country as we can. A country that is strong can actually...
On wind power, though.
Yeah. Well, a country that is economically powerful in every possible facet. We have all of the resources in the world. We have an incredibly educated population. We're in one of the most peaceful areas in the world. Our southern and our northwestern border is protected by the most powerful military the world's ever seen in history, bar none. And we are squandering all of these advantages over things that are of very little consequence to us in 20 years. We can all want to conserve the environment. I have 3 kids. I need the environment to be better today or better tomorrow than it is today. I need that. And we're going to have that. But I also need to have hope that we can afford to have schools and my kids will have opportunities to do whatever they're led to do and have the opportunity to do that. And I weep for the fact that we're squandering all of these benefits. Like the rest of the world is fighting.
Well, and that's it. You've seen it.
Yes.
So most people may travel a couple hundred miles from home. And Canada is very blessed because Canadians typically tend to travel a little bit more broad than most.
Yeah.
Most Americans really don't travel much. They do. They're more in the proximity of where they were born. That's
Sure.
kind of where they raise. That's where
Sure.
they stay. You being in the military, you've come face to face with people who don't support Western values, who completely disagree with how we run our country. The fact that you and I are...
Well, the fact that you're not covered actually would be a grave insult.
I was going to go with equal. I didn't want to arm wrestle you or anything, but I think I can match you wit wise, maybe a little bit. But to have even this conversation,
yeah.
And so, where does that lead us?
Well,
Because your perspective is very unique. I mean, you have seen it firsthand.
I'm doing everything I can to share my perspective. I've seen war zones in Afghanistan. I've seen the Middle East. I've worked in Africa.
Like, tell me some of your stories of the thing. Because, I mean, when you came back, you had to face those memories. You had to face the horrors. You had to... I don't believe, and we have to train our military men and women to shoot at something, because it's not a natural thing to want to do or to have to do. We have to train people to do that.
Actually, there's some really powerful studies, and I can speak to it firsthand. The amount of overrides you need to have in order to take another human life.
It's hard.
It's supposed to be, and it is. It's an unnatural thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and because it's an unnatural thing. To even to be put into that situation, like you said, I mean, most people would. How do you deal with a child who comes to you? You don't know whether they're an enemy, whether they need help, whether they're.
Well, kids are always a bit spooky because they never get used up to a certain age. They never get used as weapons. Kids will be used as early spotters, so they run up kites so you can spot your movement through a village, and then they'd be able to place an ambush or something. And but they were also a good barometer. So the kids around you knew you were okay. But as soon as the kids left, you knew it was time to throw down. So that was the worst thing with kids is that when something horrible happened to them, because kids are universal. They're just kind of they're an innocent. So something horrible. I mean, that stays with you forever. But with the ones that really broke my heart. And this is, again, you want to know about how is that the enemy, because we were so good at getting the improvised explosive device, the IED emplacers, and zapping them before they were able to emplace, they started coercing their handicapped population for being emplacers. So they would have their people who were developmentally challenged emplace the IEDs. When we found that out, that one broke a lot of guys that we were fighting. And killing handicapped people because the Taliban were using them as fronts. So
their definition of the value of life is different.
It's significantly different. People think that these values we have are universal. We say it's a universal human rights. They're universally applauded because that's what everyone. I'm a very good person. Oh yes, universal. It's not universally valued. It's not universally understood. The value of life outside of Western Europe, United States, Canada, like the Western world, is cheap, and they don't care. Life is cheap. I have seen, it's not they don't care for their kids, it's that it's a resource to be used.
Well, we do have some cultures that have honor killings, that don't have respect for their wives, don't have respect for their children, don't have...
Well, it's respect for kids, but once you've broken the code, you're no longer a person. You're now lower than a dog. So they have this indoctrination, this culture that's overridden some of their basic humanity. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be, and you can't fight it unless you know that exists. And it does. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to the context of Canada, what I try to do is I try to share my perspective as much as I possibly can. That you would appreciate, have some gratitude for what our forefathers built. And I don't care if you're a first-generation Canadian, fresh off the plane, fresh off the boat, great. But appreciate as I appreciate, my grandfather came in 46. I appreciate those Canadians who came in the 1800s and settled this land. I get to enjoy the fruits of your labor as well, and I'm so grateful. And that's the thought. You need to be, before you do anything about how we need to change this country, be grateful.
For what we have.
Oh man, if you even had an inkling of how broken this world is and how quickly this country can become that broken, instead of coming together as a country, we're going to just be an all versus all, just a monkey knife fight. I mean, it's my absolute nightmare. Like, how many dystopian shows do you have to watch on Netflix to realize that is not the future you want? I want a future of hope.
But do you think there's that? But we've allowed the freedom muscle to atrophy.
Yeah.
People don't think that could happen here. That's not even possible. That's Venezuela, one of the richest countries in the world, is in complete disrepair and chaos. And but people, but that's there. That's not here.
Oh yeah. If that shows so much ignorance about the fact that we're the same people. The same people who think it can't happen here, or will also be the first to admit that we're all the same kind of people. Great, we're all the same people. We're all one human race. That means what happens in one place can happen in another. All you need is a certain amount of the conditions to be met. So if there was a financial collapse where all of a sudden all the money dried up and we were no longer able to pay for our heat in this country, boom, this place would fall like a house of cards. Like, our system is, because the more complex you make a system, the more fragile it can become. But because we're so good and we've been so blessed by having so many hardworking, unspoken heroes in this country propping this thing up, that we think this country is invincible. I hate to tell you, it's not. It's very fragile. And I am worried that we're not prepared for this period of turmoil that we're about to enter. And I'll tell you right now, as the northern neighbor, I think the most likely outcome, if Canada fails, is we're just going to become an American protectorate. Now, that has a few things, going for some people who want to go work south of the border, but anyone who actually has, gratitude for Canada as an idea, as a country that it has some worth because it's contributing something to the human experiment, then you should be really mindful about what's going to happen over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you see happening? Do you see us doing a little bit of a course correction, or do you see things sort of degrading a little bit further?
How do I see
people
this?
People are reactive. People don't like to think that that's even a possibility or that can happen. But I mean, you've lived through it. You've experienced it.
How do I see that? I don't see it going well. The reason I don't is I don't think my fellow Canadians have enough of a perspective, enough gratitude to realize that's a possibility. And when it happens, it will be, if not too late, it'll be extremely painful for all of us. And that does break my heart. It doesn't have to be this painful, or how painful it's about to become. We could have handled this much easier earlier. This last election, it did matter. That there were some ideas where we could enshrine the individual and their freedoms, the freedom of speech to say something.
So let's talk about that for a second, because we have a grade 11 student, young lady, who is defending the black and the red poppy.
Yep.
Are you going to be donning your rainbow poppy on November 11th?
No, I will not. Actually, for the interview, I hope your audience will be forgiving of me. I did not place my property correctly. Rookie mistake, and fallen into a puddle into disrepair, so I don't have mine. So I'm going to buy 5 tonight when I go back to my house. But no, I will not be buying a rainbow poppy. Rainbow poppies are not the symbol. Just like a rainbow Canada flag is not the symbol of my country. There has to be things that transcend sexuality. Yes, sexuality is a hugely important component of human existence. Congratulations, we have to breed and we have to experience love, and yes, great. But there are more things to life than sexuality that transcend that. Duty, honor, freedom. And frankly, that the poppy is one of those symbols that transcends all those things. It doesn't represent exclusively the LGBTQ2+, S, etc., etc. It doesn't represent that. It represents all Canadians. Just like the law doesn't represent singularly one group. It doesn't represent white males. It doesn't represent LGBTQ2+, S, etc., etc. It doesn't represent that. It represents all of us. That's my thing. And to say that's a hate crime, this is exactly where I get upset. That you think that you can co-opt a symbol because it matches your virtue signaling, that you think you can be part of this, of the in crowd. And it breaks my heart because you're just alienating more people. The poppies that grew in Flanders fields were red and black. That's what they are. And when McCrae wrote his poem, he was weeping for his friend that was killed. And he watched these poppies still growing over these graves and wondering how something so beautiful could mark something so horrible. They did not grow as a rainbow. And it absolutely is shattering to me that something can be so co-opted. And we're so confused now. And we don't have the strength of will to stand up and say, stop. You have a right to your freedom of expression. You do not have the right to impose that on anyone else, nor do you have the right to create and co-opt symbols of national unity. So no, I will not be wearing a rainbow poppy.
That was really good on the poppy, because it boils down to individuals are pushing their will
Yes.
upon other people. And I mean, the whole purpose of government is to actually protect the individual's independence and
Yes.
sovereignty.
Yeah, yeah.
Or sovereign individuals. And our today, I feel the one area that is the biggest threat to that is government. And these institutions that I think are being funded by government, like our universities, even some of our school and education. So you and I have been talking about what to do with this channel.
Yes, yeah, we've been talking for a while about this, yeah.
And where are we going to do now post-election, and none of us have anything to do.
Well, yeah. Well.
How are we going to change the outcome of the next election if we want to see principles such as freedom, fairness, respect, responsibility? Where do we go? What do we do?
Well, I think it's... I've been reflecting over these conversations we've been having for a while about this, and even in the conversations during the campaign, and the fact that we seem to have lost our ability to have a common language. And
sorry, I disagree with you. We have to stop that now.
Well played. But yeah, but that's the point, And sometimes we don't have that common language where before we had this common basis of understanding what it was. It was just an assumed. And that's really, in a lot of ways, you have to have that. That's how society functions. We have to have some underlying assumptions. So not every time we have a discussion, well, this is what I mean by contract. Well, this is what I mean by financial market. Well, this is what I mean by...
But language has been hijacked.
Well, certainly. And this is part of the... But not
on that, you mentioned earlier when you came in, when you were, when some of the positions you were in the military, you said, well, they did a really good job at, I think we were talking about the UN peacekeeping.
Oh, yes.
Oh, what a really nice title.
Oh, yeah, no, it was excellent branding.
Branding, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so what I was referencing in the UN, when it was first brought up, it was to solve the Suez crisis, and it was to separate the French and British from that really badly conceived invasion. And so they said, well, they're peacekeepers. Really brilliant branding. It worked so well, and then they actually used that again in Cyprus, and that was to separate the Turks and the Greeks, because they're both NATO allies, and they couldn't have them dusting up when their true enemy at the time for NATO was the Soviet Union. And then, unfortunately, it worked so well, they kept that branding and kept going, and then it became something it never was. But we don't understand that either. And I think, language is hijacked, but also history has been either willfully or through ignorance forgotten. And so when I was thinking about this, is, maybe we do need to go back a little bit to formula. I've seen through, as much as I hate the future, there are a few good things about the magic of the interweb. And it's being able to have these long-form conversations. And if you can self-direct learning, and you just need to show to people that there are ways that they are inheritors of an amazing legacy, that they're not just some island cast adrift in the this frozen Arctic. We are inheritors of this legacy of 2,000 years of brilliance, of understanding, of literature, and how best to organize ourselves.
Well, some of my favorite books and authors were written in the 1800s.
Oh, yeah.
And the funniest thing is they are just as relevant today. Like the stories and the language is a little bit different, but the content is just as relevant today, especially as it relates to economics, especially as it relates to freedom, especially as it relates to nations and trade, and then you take a look at not so long ago, your Milton Friedman's, and he talked about all these things. And
you bet. Well, so I think there's a vehicle for being able to broaden the discussion, and it doesn't have to be, because there's a lot of different ways you could go about this, and I think I would flip it on its head and say, rather than talking down to people or saying, oh, well, people they're not up to this.
But these are not complex things.
They're not. Well, and here's the thing: you need to give people credit. Despite rumors to the contrary, we are very well educated as a people, and even the uneducated. Like, it doesn't matter whether you have what's considered a lower position or whether you're a high position. I think it's the vanity of the intelligentsia. By that I mean you have the people who are, the professors, the philosophers, the people
the academics.
The academics. Thank you. That's their vanity, saying, "Oh, well, we have access to the secret knowledge of man. If only the poor, unwashed masses could ever understand it." Yeah, they can, actually, because they can read. And now through the magic of the internet and interweb, when you're driving, you can listen to this. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And because, thankfully Hollywood is making such terrible, terrible products, people have time to watch on their TVs YouTube. And you can find something that's actually uplifting, something positive. And I think there's some avenues for this. So I think this is where I'm going to try and put a little bit of my effort in concert with yourself, if you're open to it, and just trying to see what we can do to help drive some of those foundational conversations, and
reestablish a foundation of the basics.
Yeah.
What is an economy and human nature? Because people have this ideology of the way they want things to be without understanding that the best way to accomplish, because I think we all agree on the outcome, what we want to see. What we disagree on is the mechanism, how to best get there.
You bet.
And if we understand history, it's not that hard to understand the best mechanisms to employ to get us there, because history tells us.
Absolutely. And I'd also say, one of those great teachers is you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So if someone's saying, well, we need to have this as our new political system, we need to adopt fanatical socialism, we need to do away with capitalism, it's an absolute aberration, we got to get rid of the ultra-rich, take all their wealth down. If that's what you want, okay, but before you do that, just take a look at some historic examples of where that's been applied.
Yes.
And how has that
Let's take a look at East and West Germany.
You bet. That's a great historical experiment. I mean, you've taken two of the almost exact same people.
They were the exact same people.
Yeah, exact same people, same education, same background, and you applied a different political system on each different one and see what happens.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but it doesn't end well for East Germany.
No.
I mean, it took West Germany, in some ways, they still haven't fully reintegrated back in, but from 89 onwards, it took them, 20 years to pay to get them back working again?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it took less than 40 years to break them, and it took almost half that time again to bring them kind of back again. So there's countless examples. You don't have to, this is what I want. Of course you do. I want, like John Lennon's Imagine. Well, isn't that a wonderful song? Imagine. Unfortunately, what Imagine doesn't take into account is human nature.
It's real people.
Real people. Imagine if you didn't have real people to deal with. Well, then that song works.
Yeah.
Imagine if we had, if there's no government. Sure.
But that's what socialists use as their defense and their argument for socialism, though. It's because we can't trust people to do it. And I'm like,
well, who's running it?
And that's... Thank you for saying that, because that's been my argument back. But you've got people that instead of putting the power into the hands of the masses, who one can temper out the other and one can counteract the other, because it's done on such a large scale.
Yeah.
We kind of, we're going to make mistakes and there's going to be bloopers, but in general, they're going to be little tiny, blips on the screen.
You bet.
If you concentrate that into the hands of one person, let's take a look at Nazi Germany, and concentrated the power into a small little elite group. Look at how that happened.
I have even a better challenge for you or for anyone. Give me one example when you concentrate power into one or a handful of people and it's worked out well.
My household.
but the household is actually is a funny example, because as a father and as a mother, we are tyrants. We're tyrants within there. But as the child develops, the tyranny ends. Because you can't
they become a tyrant too.
Well, but because they become autonomous.
Yeah.
That's not, even if you don't want them, you could even try to retard their growth, and you could try to suppress their growth into an autonomous person, because and some parents twisted enough, they do that. it doesn't matter. Eventually, they will escape and achieve their autonomy. So even in the family context, it doesn't work. Tyranny, and this is the thing. I love that Tears for Fears song. Everyone wants to rule the world. It is so true, because in all of our hearts, well, wouldn't it be something if only I was in charge? But at least I have the humility to look. Then my reflection looks back. That's a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. If I was king of the universe for a day, it would not work out well for some people, and that's not how we're supposed to live. Because
so let's focus on that a little bit, because that really is the dichotomy I see today. Is people seem to think that, okay, well, we can't trust people, right? We can't trust people to do the right thing, mm-hmm. So we appoint people to do the right thing, mm-hmm. But they're people too, right? And so the power then gets concentrated in the handful of a few. Yes. As opposed to resting with the masses. And I'm struggling with, how do we reestablish and inform and educate people that it can't be groupthink, right? Because it's all about the greater good.
So I think, by taking a step back, I think what it is, we need to not panic about the change in the world at this point. The focus needs to be the individual, the empowerment of the individual. I mean, and this is why, in large measure, I'm a big acolyte of Jordan B. Peterson. I mean, I can't say enough for him. He's sorted me out in a lot of measures, and
he sorted out a lot of people on a lot of measures. Yeah, but we see how he gets attacked.
Oh well, of course, because
challenging the established.
Any time that because he is the ultimate counterculture. He's saying you don't need the state for their answer. You don't need this. You need to look to yourself first. And that's the ultimate answer, is that if we have, as a culture, are telling everyone, look to yourself first. Before you start trying, if those biblical, before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the plank out of your own. Don't worry about what's going on in the world insofar as saying you want to correct it. You're going to march and protest and down with carbon, down with oil, down with Trump, or whatever your bugaboo is of the day. Okay, I mean, they might all be worthy causes, but before you do that, is your life sorted out? Can you
is your house in order?
Is your house in order? Are you gainfully employed? Are you eating right? Are you doing laundry? I mean, just your basic fundamental things. Because if you're not if you're not master of yourself and that you're master of your own home, then what authority do you have to be lecturing anyone on how they're living?
But that's the issue today, though, is people are looking to have somebody else give them authority.
Well, sure,
and to validate.
Yeah, but I think it's also misunderstood, and this speaks to the misunderstanding of our Western democracy, and also our politicians are quite poor at this as well. I don't think they understand it. The government doesn't give authority. The government doesn't give sovereignty. The government doesn't give anything. The government is an apparatus to organize us. Sovereignty is with the individual. And that's the secret sauce to Western civilization. It's the intrinsic dignity, that divine spark within every person, that every person is valid and has worth just in their existence, not because of what they offer into the world.
And that's very much coming back to the Western values.
Yes, yeah.
And it's embedded in that, but I think we're losing that.
Oh, for sure we are.
It is coming down to groupthink and identity politics. Yes. And this group versus this group and this group. And it's really interesting, because I remember one day when I was out campaigning, I'd come across this young lady, and she was transgender. Sure. And I found it fascinating, because she's like, well, what have you done for me? And I went, nothing.
What have you done for me?
Right? I'm going, because we individually, we each have our own direction. We want to live our own lives, do our own thing. But there was a sense of entitlement of, well, what are you going to do for me? Well, I want to do this, so you should help me do that. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, well, no, I shouldn't be an obstacle in your path to allowing you to do that. But as far as me actually contributing financially or whatever, no, I don't have an obligation to do that. So it really brought down for me this sense of this entitlement. We have this sense of entitlement in there's groups that believe that they have special rights and their rights trump my rights.
Well, yeah. So what sparks in me there, and this is I quote this quite often. If anyone spends any time with me, they get sick of me quoting this all the time. But so Scipio Africanus, he was a Roman general, great champion, destroyer of Carthage. Maybe not, that wasn't his best thing he ever did. He salted the earth and wiped them out as a people. But he has a great quote.
I'm never to get on the wrong side of you.
Well, I'm not Scipio, but what Scipio said, if the people realize they can vote themselves free bread, will be the death of the republic. And
bread and circuses is exactly what they got.
And they started getting free bread, and then soon enough, Caesar, and then the republic ended not with a roar, but it ended with applause. Because people were happy that they were able to get all these free things.
Yeah.
And the greatest bulwark that you can do to shore up against that fight is clearly as you possibly can articulate the truth. And I kind of have a bit of a laugh because in the modern era we talk about what's my truth.
No, the truth is not very popular today.
Well, but here's the thing.
But what is the truth? My dad taught me, he's like, there's three sides to every coin. Your side, my side, and somewhere in between lies the truth. Is that true?
Well, so you're talking about a subjective reality. But before you get into the areas that might pertain to gray, start dealing with black and whites. And we have surprisingly a large amount of black and whites.
Yeah.
And that's, so start with the commonalities. And I think if we are able to best empower a person to realize that they are the best defenders of themselves and they are the architects of their best life, America's doing it for 200 years, or 200 plus years, 1776. Canada's been doing this for over 150 years of being able to remind its citizens that they're, as individuals.
But the last 20, 30 years, you have to admit, it's shifted.
Oh, it has. So
significantly, like we're talking landslide.
Yes. So then I guess the counter is, do we hang our head on hope of trying to say, okay, well, what can we do? You and I, as individuals, anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening, what can we do? Because the forces are arrayed against us, and we're meant to feel this. We're meant to feel small, and we're meant to feel hopeless. That's what the statists, that's what the collectivists want us to feel, is that there's nothing you can do. I counter that. I think there's something powerful that I can do, and you can do, and it's by speaking honestly and frankly about those things. Someone, I've been called horrible names, from bigot to racist to xenophobe to Islamophobe. I don't know. I'm more phobic than anything I never even knew of before.
I'm so glad you fought for all those people to make sure that they could call you all those things.
And that's right, I did. That's right, I did.
Right.
But the funny thing is that I can say clearly that every person, even the person calling me that, has worth in themselves. Now, if you're trying to impose your will and dominate over someone, now you're going to see a much different version of me. You're going to see a much different version of a lot of people like me. And that's not a place I would like to go. I think there's still a chance we can not go to that very dark place. But that's the forces that are, like when we start playing with fire, I that's my concern.
Yeah, I look at, the reactions of these protests like Antifa, for example. When you have somebody standing there with their face covered, bullying an old woman, trying to cross the road, standing in her way.
How pathetic.
Well, yeah, I look at that and I go, is that where we're at today?
It must
a young
be,
able person, can hide behind a mask or a scarf or hide their face or hide behind even a computer screen.
Yeah.
And make claims. There doesn't seem to be any accountability for that. And here you have been put your life on the line and enabled them to be able to do these things, to protect their right. They have a right to say, they have a right to do. I totally agree. We should not be empowering or enabling hate speech. But I think we have criminal laws for that. But I think when you have the government that tries to protect one group over another group and start censoring and being selective about rights. And
this was always going to be the slippery slope when it came to hate speech, because defining it. It's always tough because it becomes a mechanism, because free speech is truly the speech to say something
offensive,
really unpopular.
Even offensive.
So now, but the thing is, and this is going to be the irony that they're going to have to face, like the university with the safe spaces, trying to stop all the people from saying unpopular things. They're going to suffer the same thing that the people on the right, the individuals are now facing. This atrophied ability to defend themselves. We're rediscovering it very quickly. I'm hopeful. Whereas these safe spacers, the people who stick their fingers in, don't want to talk about it. What's going to happen to them is they're going to have zero ability to confront and articulate and defend themselves when life rears its head. It's going to be, and because we're not building any...
That's okay, because the government's there to take care of them.
Well, and in some ways, maybe that's by design. Maybe that's by design because, they've been, as people, neutered. They've been made less effective. Nothing more pathetic than a person who doesn't realize that they have sovereignty over themselves. It's like the phenomenon of the man-child. The Peter Pan syndrome. Shucks, we made stories about this. The Peter Pan syndrome. Oh, I never want to grow up. Well, that's great. I don't know. You can want one hand and someone else another, and clap and see which one fills up first. Mm-hmm. We all have to grow up. The world is a horrible place, and it's a wonderful place. But you can't just, through wishful thinking, think it's going to be one way. So what worries me about is, from Canada, we're tearing ourselves apart. You'll be okay. I'll be fine. I'm totally fine. My kids are going to be great. But as a country, we're not going to be prepared for what's going to happen. And I'm here to care for our country and prepare it for what's coming. And what's coming is we're going to be in a contest for our lives and resources, and we're not going to be prepared for it. Mm-hmm.
We've talked about a lot of things. We've jumped around quite a bit.
Bet.
We're going to bring it back to it's Remembrance Day.
Yes.
We want to honor our soldiers, honor the men and women who fought for our freedom.
Yeah.
We want to end on a hopeful note.
Yes, of course.
Right.
Well, hope remains. There's a lot. I have a lot of hope for us as a people. I have a lot of hope for our community. I think for me, my challenge that I for myself, and I would challenge you and anyone who's listening or watching, exercise your freedoms. Exercise your freedom of speech. Be fearless. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna be scary.
I ran for an election.
Oh, I know.
I get it.
You know. It's tough. It is tough because people are, you don't ever, and you're gonna be attacked. But here's the thing: if you don't exercise these rights, they are no longer your rights. You've already given them up. So that's my challenge to them. And I would say for Remembrance Day, it's a great time for renewal of those things. Be reminded of all the sacrifices that our forefathers have made, and that our current serving soldiers are making for us even today. And it's not the right to just be nice and cozy in your heated home, and that those are great things. But it's your freedom to choose your life and to believe what you want to believe. So in that time of renewal, that's my challenge.
Excellent. I think that's a great way to end. You are going to be at...
Oh, yeah, I'll be at the... so Cochrane has... the Legion puts on the Remembrance Day service. It'll be at the Cochrane High School at 10:00. That's 10 a.m. And they do a march down the hill to the Cenotaph, which is just outside the Legion. The corner of Fast Gas and Shell, if anyone doesn't know Cochrane.
Don't name streets. That's good.
Yeah,
Fast Gas and Shell.
You bet. It's a really tight space, but the RC are really good for blocking off. Come in, it's a very meaningful thing, and then afterwards we go in the Legion, have a few pints. where I remember my friends.
Because beer makes everything better.
Well, hey, I'm free to have it. I'm not not under Sharia law. So yeah, we have
No prohibition.
Yeah, no prohibition. So free to have a few pints, and yeah, I raise a few for my friends that I've lost over the fighting. And yeah, if anyone sees me, please feel free to introduce. I'm not a hugger, but apparently, according to Nadine, I'm still good to be hugged. So
he's a hugger. I told him so.
Yeah, there it is.
So you're going to be doing a little commemoration,
yeah,
and giving a little
talk.
Yeah.
So my role in it, I'll be giving a little speech outlining, kind of my service and also why we commemorate Remembrance Day. I try to put a lot of thought into that, and then they've asked me to be the master of ceremonies down at the cenotaph, which it's always meaningful. Sometimes it's tough for some of the kids watching the parade of wreaths. They're like, how many wreaths are we going to put out? A lot.
Maybe more than we have to.
Way more than we have to, but because it's the one time a year where the Legion really brings in a lot of money, and every dollar that goes to that it goes not to the Legion of the building. Like even those poppies, it doesn't go to keeping the Legions open. It goes to veterans and their causes. So that is a value. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, my $10 for the steak dinner tonight, the Legion, that goes to them.
Yeah, and that's also important to keep the lights on. So there, winner, steak dinner.
It's good steak dinner if you've never been.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, you and I have so many conversations, just you and I, and I'm like, we got to start recording some of these because, somebody is going to want to listen to this.
I'll be curious to feedback. Sometimes I can talk a bit fast, so I'll try to slow down if you ever have me back.
Awesome. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share. Please click the notification so that you know when we do the next video with Bryce. Have a good night.